Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Hello everyone. My name is Tyler Scripps. I am a student at CU Boulder here. I'm also a volunteer. For the Conference on World Affairs. I'm a student chair for the Science and Technology Committee, and I'm so excited to moderate this panel today. For recording purposes, today is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. It is 3:30 p.m., and this is panel number 18137, titled Cyber Battlegrounds. Before we get started, the University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous people in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. One other thing I'd like to mention is that we want to be sure you get a chance to ask questions. Here's how we'll handle the Q&A. We'll reserve the end of the discussion for that Q&A. We're using a note card system to receive questions from the audience. At any time in the session, simply raise your hand to request a note card and pencil from one of our producers. Please write legibly. If you are a student, please note this in your question on the card. When you finish, raise your hand to hand it to the producer who will bring it up to me. I urge everyone to please make your questions brief and to the point. And now I'd like to do a brief introduction of each panelist. For more information, you can find their full bios on the CWA website. Paul Misener is the founder and principal of Misener Innovation, a consultancy focused on helping organizations innovate, advocate, and communicate. Paul spent 23 years as a global vice president at Amazon, where he helped build the company and led its global innovation policy and communications. An engineer, attorney, and seasoned policy expert, Paul has testified before Congress over 30 times and advised leaders around the world on innovation strategy. Daniel Watson has led communication strategy at the highest levels of government and advised leaders in politics, the private sector, and civil society on some of the most challenging policy and reputational issues of our time. He most recently served as the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs during the Biden administration, driving the communication strategy on topics including border security and immigration policy, foreign and domestic terrorism, major cybersecurity incidents, federal disaster response, congressional oversight, and other matters impacting the department's 260,000-strong workforce. Dan joined DHS from the Public Affairs Consultancy, FGS, partner for 5 years. Dan advised high-profile clients, including Fortune 10 technology companies, and some of the largest financial institutions on front-page news issues, providing counsel on strategic communications, public affairs, crisis management, and public policy advocacy. Laura Harder is a dedicated security leader with over 24 years of experience spanning military service, government and private sectors. She is the Director of Systems Assurance at Kaiser Permanente and proudly serves as the Operations Flight Commander for the 860th OSS in the Air Force Reserves. A passionate advocate for cybersecurity awareness and inclusion, Laura is the founding president of the Northern Colorado ISSA chapter and serves on the ISSA International Board. And finally, Ellen Weintraub has served as a commissioner on the U.S. Federal Election Commission since 2002 and was elected chair for 2025. During her tenure, she made her mark as a strong advocate for meaningful campaign finance law enforcement, robust disclosure, and combating foreign influence in our elections. She's been a critic of the system that gives disproportionate influence to billionaire donors and was a persistent voice in 2020 refuting unfounded claims of voter fraud. On February 6, 2025, she received a letter from the president stating that he was removing her from her position on the commission. Weintraub has published articles in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and leading law reviews, and is a frequent speaker on news shows and at conferences at home and abroad. Prior to her appointment to the FEC, she was counsel to the political law group of Perkins Cole LLP and counsel to the House Ethics Committee. Now that we've gotten through some of the boring stuff, I would like, not that you guys are boring, but I want to hear you talk, not me. I wanted to ask, I want to give you all first an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Is there anything I missed or anything you'd like to say to the audience? We'll start with you, Paul.
Nothing to add, but thank you very much, everyone, for coming to hear us. We'll try that again. All right. So thank you for coming to hear us very much.
And I'll echo that. Nothing else to add. It's a pleasure to be here. Go Buffs.
I just warn people I don't bring positive and life affirming, so I hope you're ready.
I'm not a cyber person, I'm an elections person, so I'm going to talk about cyber and elections.
Great. I just wanted to open up with a question. For each of your unique backgrounds, when you think of cyber threats, what does that mean to you and your unique background? Anyone wants to go? I'm not going to call on names here.
I nominate Laura to go first.
So cyber is not just my job, it really is my passion. So I could talk ad nauseum about this topic. For me, there's really 5 major things when it comes to cyber. First is economic costs, meaning like how much it costs you as individuals and businesses when cyber threats occur. The second part is state-sponsored espionage, which I think is fascinating. I know this is bad, but I think that spying and espionage and the stealing of intellectual property is an interesting topic, though, again, not positive and life-affirming. Cyber threats also have a geopolitical issue associated with them. This is when you can essentially enhance or make your wars better by using cyber tactics to add to your arsenal of weapons. Then there's the impact on government, which I think Ellen will have some brilliant insight on. And the last part is emerging threats, which is all the new technology that we are using today, from artificial intelligence all the way to quantum cryptography and computing. And so cyber threats affect all of those things. They affect your everyday lives. And so it really is a relevant topic in kind of any conversation, but has a very delicate balance on how it interacts with other parts like politics and science, advancement, community, and things like that.
I can jump in a little bit just with perspective from at least my time in the prior administration and the priorities there. We saw cybersecurity as one of the biggest domestic threats to individuals, but also to our infrastructure and our national security. And, during the Biden administration, there were designated leaders within the White House, but also within the Department of Homeland Security, where I served. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which was actually an agency that was created by the Trump administration, the first Trump term, was promoted and expanded to meet this growing threat. Because I think when we think about the cyber battlegrounds, really everything can be a cyber battleground. And that touches all elements of our infrastructure. When we're talking about infrastructure, we're not just talking about roads and bridges, we're talking about our water supply, our financial system, our planes in the air. Now, are these going to fail or fall at the hands of a cyber attack tomorrow? No, but they are anything and on all sectors need to be focused on cyber threats. And I think the role of government has been to act as a conduit, sharing information and receiving information, and a partner, and that has taken an expansion of CISA. As you may have read in the news, CISA is under attack like many federal departments are, and potentially facing massive cuts that I think would undermine this goal.
So I'll go first because I know Ellen has a cleanup from the election perspective. About 45 minutes ago, the four of us sat down and were just chatting informally. Up until that point, I had been a cyber optimist. So yeah, listen and be afraid. So I was coming at it from the perspective of technology, and so I am more confident than I have been in the past couple decades of our technological ability to fight cyber terrorism, cyber attacks, et cetera. And so my optimism coming in today was based largely on the availability of countermeasures, and countermeasures offered by a variety of larger companies who simply are in a better position to provide protections against cyber attacks. And so perhaps now my principal concerns are around social engineering and maybe the politics of the day, whereby no matter how good your technology is, if it's not used appropriately, then it's useless.
Okay. So, like I said, I'm not a cyber person. The way I see this in the election context really is in two buckets. A couple of years ago, the hot topic in Washington was deepfakes. AI burst on the scene, and all of a sudden, all the politicians were afraid that there was going to be a deepfake made of them that would circulate in the days before the election and would be completely erroneous, and they'd have no way of refuting it. And there was a lot of anxiety about this. There were lots of hearings that went on in Washington. Bills were introduced on a bipartisan basis, some of them, and none of them went anywhere. And while there were some notable examples of deepfakes that were outed in time in advance of the elections, there also have been some examples, particularly internationally, that may have had an impact on elections. But in the United States, there do not appear to have been any that actually interfered with elections. We don't think there were, we didn't see any big October surprise deepfakes, and the issue seems to have sort of gone off the radar at the moment. What I think is more concerning, not that this one couldn't come back, is the, as my colleagues have alluded to, issues about misinformation and disinformation, sometimes coming from foreign sources, sometimes coming domestically and being amplified by foreign sources, sometimes coming from foreign sources being amplified by domestic sources. Back in 2016, we know that the Russians had a troll farm, the Internet Research Agency. You may recall Mark Zuckerberg at a hearing laughing at the concept that the Russians were trying to interfere with our election. I guess the joke was on him, because they really were. If you don't believe me, there's a 5-volume opus from the Senate Intelligence Committee, produced on a bipartisan basis, that details all of the evidence that they found about Russian attempts at interfering, which some people quaintly described as meddling, as if it was, like your neighbor who was sort of being nosy over the backyard fence, but really it was information warfare. In the 2020 election, we got a lot smarter. We had CISA that got involved, and there was a coordinated effort from the federal government with a bunch of the state election administrators to catch foreign interference through our intelligence network and warn state actors about it. And we had actually a pretty good system in place in 2020. But we seem to be abandoning all of that. As has been mentioned, CISA is under internal attack. They're losing a lot of their people. There was a foreign influence task force at the Department of Justice, which has been disbanded. So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work going forward in terms of whether we will have the infrastructure in place to protect our election infrastructure from cyber attacks.
On that happy note,
Sorry.
Wonderful. We've got a student question here. What are your thoughts on the future of NSM 22 government, and how do you think that will affect our infrastructure resilience? I'm not familiar with this. Does anyone know what this means?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe we'll receive some clarification. Thank you. I've got another question here. What steps are you taking to prepare for Q-Day, when quantum computing will be able to crack any encryption?
Ooh, that's a really good question. NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, if I'm wrong with the acronym, I apologize, I'm really close. They actually started this a few years back. There is new quantum cryptography standards that have been deployed and are being implemented. Essentially, if you don't understand encryption, here's what it is. You took like, hello, Bob, and then you scramble up the words. That's kind of what encryption is, right? And so you can't read it easily. Algorithms use mathematical equations to turn hello, Bob into, 150, 250 characters, and that's why it's hard to read. The concern we have is when quantum cryptography becomes a thing. Quantum cryptography is like the next evolution of what computers can do. And what it means today is the cryptography that probably is on your phone, if you have an iPhone, right? You have AES encryption, probably 256 bits. It takes millions of years today to do what's called brute force attack, where you would try every single combination. When quantum cryptography becomes, or when quantum computing becomes available, if they can get it figured out, essentially everything that's ever been stolen from the government that was encrypted, we didn't care. We were like, fine, you can't read it, no big deal. Well, now you could. And that's the concern. So there's a big movement now to try to move to this newer encryption standard. But we all live in the real world, right, guys? Like, we live in the real world, and changing things costs money. And so the adoption of the new cryptography is going to take time. And so we're hoping, right, we're kind of in a race against what is possible in the future versus what are they going to get to first. Kind of like the space race, who gets to the moon first. There's lots of countries, including, there's a consortium here in Colorado that is actively working towards getting to quantum computing to a point where it is like really usable.
Okay.
and NIST is right here in Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado, yep.
I had a question that was kind of personal for me. What kind of things are actually being attacked? Are we seeing attempts on voting machines or private intellectual property of large companies with lots of IP? Where are we seeing actors trying to access via cyber methods?
You want to start?
I can jump in first. So I mean, I think it's you have a variety of targets, right? And they're going to be going after areas first where you have the crown jewels, and it depends on the actor, right? So criminal organizations might be more interested in financial service institutions, or ransomware for individuals, or getting personalized information that they can use to exploit individuals. On the what we call advanced persistent threats, which is essentially the PRC, Russia, North Korea, Iran, they are interested in some of these entities, but they are infiltrating infrastructure for sort of two purposes. One is to show that they're there and that they can access it and they can do things with it. And then the second is to exfiltrate information that can be used for espionage purposes. So that, I mean, really that can range from a variety of different targets, but everything is ripe for it.
I think that's a great answer, actually. My answer would be everything that's connected to the internet, and even things that sometimes aren't. Cyber crime and cyber attacks are very tied in with each other, and ultimately you want one of a few things. You want money. I think money is a big motivator. Financial crimes are like the number one reason that cybercrime exists. The figures for this year are $1.2 trillion. That's how much cybercrime is costing globally everyone today. So that affects businesses who are being hit by ransomware, hospitals that are being hit by attackers, which has been kind of horrible for us at Kaiser, because that's the thing that we worry about because we can't provide care to you, right? Like if a hospital is under a cyber attack, how do you render care? We have incredible plans today to address that, but I think you as individuals, if you went to an emergency room, barring the exercises and the work we do, you want the fidelity that somebody can help you and take care of you. And I will tell you, I lived in Fort Collins, and a few years ago I had to have a surgery. It wasn't a big deal. But they had a ransomware attack at their medical facility, and now my images of the part of my body that they were going to go like cut into were locked. Right? So like my body's still my body, right? You're still going to open me up and take something out, but it would be really nice if you maybe had the images to see where that thing is in, the middle of me. And so that's just kind of one of those personal situations where I think many of you would feel kind of the same way. But apart from that, I mean, cyber affects everything. It can affect the Colonial Pipeline that hit in the Northeast. There was the water plant in Florida. There's energy sector attacks that are happening every day. So I think really anything can get hit. And sometimes, we talk about low-hanging fruit in cybersecurity, which means like if you have an apple tree, which apple are you going to pick? The one closest to you, right? And so we call those low-hanging fruit. And the hard part, right, the guys that are at the very tippy top of the tree with like a golden apple, that's like the Department of Defense, the Treasury. But they're not impermeable either. SolarWinds attacked 18,000 different customers through kind of a really beautiful supply chain attack. Treasury was hit, and Commerce, I think, was hit by SolarWinds.
Broader than that.
It was, right, but those were the two kind of big ones. And so
Can you elaborate on what a supply chain attack is?
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely. A supply chain attack is essentially malware is embedded somewhere inside of a system when it's being manufactured, meaning like a chip that goes into, say, a phone, has malware already installed on it, they package it up, put it in a box, and then they sell it to you. And nothing happens for a really long time. They're playing a long game. But then once they want to use it, it's already there. You never would have known, it was already installed. We didn't know. I mean, I don't know if you had to respond to SolarWinds. I think it ruined my Christmas and Thanksgiving that year. So it takes a ton of work. And it's also very hard because, like, the way that cyber systems, the preventive ones, which I love, the preventive systems, a lot of preventive systems use artificial intelligence to say, okay, I'm going to plug this thing in. What does normal traffic look like? Okay? But if your normal traffic already has bad guy traffic in it, it's now normal traffic. You can't stop something that it thinks is legitimate. And that's, I think, one of the big challenges with supply chain attacks is that it comes in from the very beginning, from its inception, from its manufacturing piece. And it's almost impossible to find.
And let me just add, since you asked about voting machines, and I should preface this by saying that the FEC does not run elections. We don't have any voting machines at the FEC. That's all done at the state and local level. It's a very decentralized system, and that is actually protective. There is no one computer that can be hacked from outside that will affect the vote counts across the country. And even at the state and local level, voting machines tend not to be connected to the internet for exactly this reason. So it is highly unlikely that there would be a hack from a foreign government that would affect a voting machine anywhere in this country.
I think we were talking about this a little bit before, to harp on that point a little bit more, that I think the election infrastructure actually provides a good example and case study about how you protect infrastructure, because in some ways it's too big to hack in that it's decentralized and that it would take intensive coordination across the country in order to hack it. And if you think about there's a lot of concern around this in 2020, but also in 2024. And when, on election day, what was the biggest threat we were seeing? It was phoned-in bomb threats, right? That was one of the biggest things we saw this past November, and that is incredibly low-tech and easy to determine pretty quickly where it was sourced, and then to provide that information to local election officials to let them know that it's not credible. So it showed a model both for how government can work together at the federal, state, and local level to respond in real time, and also how extensive planning and decentralization can protect infrastructure. Now, a lot of infrastructure is not like that. Mm-hmm. Telecom is not like that. There are a lot of parts of our infrastructure where you have single points of failure, or it is centralized for efficiency, and it ends up creating a real vulnerability.
We've got another audience question here. Why do you think the U.S. has lagged behind in detecting and defending from critical infrastructure, like healthcare with the Change Healthcare attack?
I actually disagree. I very strongly disagree that we are behind. One company out here, it's called Know Before, they do phishing exercises, and what they say on their ads is absolutely true. We as defenders have to be right 100% of the time, and it only takes one person. But the way that attackers, and this comes out of the Verizon report comes out annually, and this is echoed through Google and every other vendor as well. Phishing attacks, which is a method of social engineering. You get an email, it looks like legitimate, you click on the link, and you give up your credentials or whatever. That is the number one method, still to this day, of how bad guys get in. And it is based out of our psychology. It's either out of, yay, I won free money, I didn't know I won that raffle, to, oh my gosh, my boss is going to be upset with me because I did something wrong, right? Phishing has a psychology behind it. Social engineering is very psychologically driven. And the fact of the matter is that we spend an enormous amount of time and money and effort. Every conceivable product you can think of today, we purchase, we spend just an immense number of dollars to protect, in my field, right, the Air Force's network and the hospitals at Kaiser. But if a nurse or a doctor goes and Googles something that they shouldn't, and they get into a bad website, or they click on a phishing link that accidentally got through, your perimeter's broken. Ultimately, like, you as individuals and people are where most of the attacks will get in from.
So I think I started out, I don't remember what I said, but I think I started out saying something to the effect that social engineering concerns me more than technology does. For this particular reason, are you three, I am not, but are you three aware of resources that our audience could look up for how to combat phishing as individuals? I mean, what to look for in a phishing email, what not to do? I mean, these are basic things, but they're basic things that weren't around 10 years ago.
So there are a lot of public awareness and service campaigns that have basic steps for you. I mean, I think the first one is making sure you have multi-factor authentication on any of your devices. This didn't used to be standard. It's become more and more standard as a very basic and way to protect your devices. On the phishing threat, I think companies have also done a very good job with this in trying to inform their customers when they are going to be contacting them and when they're not going to be contacting them, what information they are going to provide and ask an answer to and what they're not. And so it is, I think it is incumbent on individuals to educate on this, but it's also, all of society needs to step up in the way that we've seen companies do it.
I'm glad you mentioned society there. We've gotten several requests for a less depressing outlook here. Laura, you've met your promise that you are not all sunshine and rainbows. What can we do proactively to prevent this sort of issue going forward as a society, or measures that we can take personally?
Well, look, I think there are 330 million of us, and educating all of us is going to be really hard. Each and every one of us has a cell phone and a bank account, and those are all vulnerabilities. And so it's not going to be easy, but it's so basic. But I think part of it is a generational gap. My kids know how to fight phishing. They're young. But as we older people haven't been educated like this. So I can't make a strong enough statement in this regard, is to just be smart about this. It's not the safe world that you thought it was. And it doesn't mean you need to be paranoid. After a while, this stuff becomes very easy to detect just by reading it. But you're absolutely right, Dan. My bank repeatedly sends me messages saying, we will never ask you for your account information or your credentials. And that's a helpful reminder. No bank would, by the way. It's not just my bank. No bank would ask you for your account information. That's somebody else.
So this is not going to be an optimistic response.
Try.
I know. But I think the threat is getting more complex, and even with education, harder to overcome when, Ellen, you talked about the deep fakes. A few years ago, everybody was concerned about it in hypothetical, but now if you can use an AI-generated voice, even authentication is more challenging. That it's okay, I'm not going to, see what's in my email, but if I hear a familiar voice, I'm going to respond to it. And we know that this has happened with CEOs, with somebody purporting to be a client or an employee has called up using audio-generated fake audio, and it's resulted in the transfer of millions of dollars in some cases. So the threat is evolving, and we're just going to have to evolve with it.
I'm going to be positive and life-affirming for 1 minute. This is unusual for me. So you as individuals, there's a couple of things. Google has a phishing training. It is free for everyone. KnowBe4 has free phishing training available for everyone. There's plenty of it out there to help you understand what to look for. Looking at who the email came from, actually clicking on the link and seeing what the URL says, like the what at what. I get these all the time. It will be illegitimate. It'll say it's from like my bank, pick a bank, right? And then I'll click on it and it'll be like somebody's Yahoo address. So that's a pretty easy tell. The second thing is we can no longer rely on spelling mistakes, which we used to be able to. We can't rely on punctuation mistakes. They are also using artificial intelligence. AI knows how to spell. So the second part of it is, it's okay. We all fall for it, right? My daughter just recently fell for a scam. My daughter has been listening to me talk about this topic literally her whole life. And why I need you to hear that is $12.5 billion will be stolen from Americans this year. But the fact of the matter is that that is an underrepresented number because we feel ashamed that we fell for it. It is not your fault that somebody is trying to go after you and steal your money. There's a very nice woman here in Colorado, and she fell for a cyber attack, which was also a romance scam. She remortgaged her home and sent hundreds of thousands of dollars to somebody that she thought was going to be her romantic partner. That is also a cyber crime. The thing is that you're not alone. The FBI there has an IC3 program, and you can report these things, and you should. And the fact is that most of you need to have connections with your loved ones, because oftentimes what we find out is that my mother-in-law, for example, fell for a scam. She was told she has to pay Microsoft for something, right? And so she was so ashamed that she had fallen for it, that she didn't want to tell anyone. But the fact is, we could help her, right? We could help her get her money back, well, sometimes, right? We could get it reported. We can at least take care of her. We could be the community around her to protect her, to make her feel safe again. Because cybercrime is victimizing. It makes you feel like you've been a victim of whatever the crime is. I have friends and colleagues who have fallen for scams where they had to pay the ransomware with cryptocurrency. Also had to learn how to buy cryptocurrency. So these things happen to individuals all over this country. Don't feel alone. Don't think you have to go at it alone. There's tons of resources online, and I just would advocate that from a kind of more optimistic standpoint, you can do this. You can learn the thing, you can get the help. There are people out there for you.
Tyler, may I add just a little something there? And that is, I think Laura's spot on. I mean, that is, everybody is susceptible to this. But the fact of the matter is, I started out by saying today that I thought that the IT infrastructure was in better shape than it has been in many years. But that's on the corporate end. It's not on the user end. And it is absolutely outrageous that 40 years after MS-DOS is introduced, we still have passwords. That is a failure. And I don't know about you, I don't know anybody's like this, but somebody might have a list of passwords in his desk. And how else can you do it? I can't remember many. And that's ridiculous. And so IT industry is trying to fix that. You said the dual factor authentication. What that means is when they text you and you get a code and you have to enter it in the website, that means you're there through a website, you're also there through your phone. It's a stopgap measure.
Mm-hmm. Or a YubiKey, and there's lots of things like that where a YubiKey is like a little USB device that you carry on you like a keychain, and it will essentially do the second part of the authentication. Well, it's called multi-factor authentication. It's something you know and something you have or are. So your biometrics is a good one too. If you do the thing with the iPhone when it looks at your face, those are biometrics, and that's how the multi-factor is connecting. And you're absolutely right. Why are we still using passwords? Because it's cheap, I think. I would highly recommend, if you don't have one, get a password manager. If you have an iPhone, it's already in there. There's lots of products out there. Are they perfect? No, we won't get into the details, but you shouldn't have to memorize. I have 838 username and passwords. I checked my password manager yesterday, and I couldn't remember all of those if my life depended
That's
on
sad. 838? Mm-hmm. I don't have that many friends.
it. You do too.
You know, it's an interesting point you made about this, how common this is. And you think back 10 years ago, if a company was hacked, it was a big news story. Home Depot. Mm-hmm. You know, these were the big news stories. Now, you remember a news story, the last company that got information hacked? No. It's like, it's a car alarm going off. We ignore it at this point. It's so commonplace. And there's such a standard of advise companies when they're going through this process on how they communicate it, and it's pretty standard, right? You're going to get offered protection. They're going to communicate with you and be upfront about it. But and then I think consumers generally are not necessarily mad at a company for it because they realize, okay, this happens.
So one topic I just wanted to bring up real quick is the espionage part, which I think is pretty fascinating. Today, you guys know espionage, you stole intellectual property from somebody else. And we used to care about things like Prada bags and Gucci and like designer things, AirPods, right? We were talking about the Beats by Dre when they first came out. And what cybercrime sometimes is not just them stealing money directly from you, is that they're stealing the intellectual property and then they're remanufacturing and selling those things for gain. And this is a really big issue with our friends in the PRC, which is our Chinese friends. And one of the things that if you're not familiar, are you all familiar with an F-35? It's an airplane we bought. It's pretty expensive. It's
really cool.
Right. So 2008 to 2016, there was an espionage attack, and essentially they hit Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and stole something like I don't know, something in the hundreds of gigabytes of data. Well, today, if you go to China, they have a J2021, and that's their version of our F-22, and then they have the J31, which is their version of our F-35. Those advancements we spent, I can't even imagine how much money we actually spent. What were they, $35 million a piece? It's a huge number, right, for each one of these airplanes. And now they have.
We didn't have any jets at the FEC. I don't know.
You should have gotten one. You should have gotten one. It should have come standard. But the fact of the matter is that cybercrime isn't just about our industry and you as an individual getting your money stolen. It's also the intellectual property, and that is likely about to get worse because tariffs with China are going to remove some protections that we've kind of enjoyed, where they kind of didn't let them make exactly the same thing, but sometimes you got a cheaper version of the AirPods. You guys know what I'm talking about. You saw when the AirPods came out, they were $200, and then suddenly, 6 months later, you could buy the same thing for $20. That's going to get worse.
We've got a couple of questions from the audience asking about what we can do regarding external threat actors in other countries. Can we proactively do something, given that they might have non-extradition or otherwise not be dealing with us? What can we do from either a counter-hacking or a political perspective to try to deal with that international border that we have to deal with there?
So the new administration has made clear that they want to have a broader emphasis on offensive cybersecurity, and with all caveats aside, DHS is a civilian agency. I have no experience in any of this, but I think just my reaction and thought on that is that we have a bit of a glass house, and I think that we have the world's financial center here. We have a supply chain and infrastructure that's based on efficiency sometimes more than resiliency, and those vulnerabilities are why our emphasis has been on defense. And pivoting to offense, I think, could have unintended consequences that it invites more damaging cyber incidents, in addition to just some of the data exfiltration and other activities we've seen today.
It used to be very expensive to buy an aircraft carrier and to stand up an army and have an ICBM fleet ready to go. And that meant that only the wealthiest countries, or the ones who put the most money into their militaries, could compete with us. No longer the case. This cyber warfare is pretty cheap comparatively. It certainly isn't aircraft carrier level, and which means that to the extent there was that long-term détente we had with the Soviet Union and Russia, even if that is getting all the headlines today, we need to worry about relationships with small nation actors. And they're not going to buy an aircraft carrier. They can't, but they can hack.
Sanctions are a traditional tool in our toolbox, and that is, of course, entirely at the discretion of the administration as to which countries they want to impose sanctions on and which actors they want to impose sanctions on.
The question brings to mind the mutually assured destruction, right? With any offensive, you must have defensive, right? Just think about a moat and a castle, and you're going after each other. They're physical, they're kinetic, they're things that you can see and touch. And cyber's none of those things, right? You could think that you have an incredible fortress and accidentally have a port open you didn't even recognize or you don't even know got turned on. It is really difficult to put what we call the layers of defense, right, around your systems. And so if you're going to go hacking at people, you really should have bulletproof defenses, which are really challenging to make. You can try and you can purchase everything, and and have every protection available to you. But the fact of the matter is that I think that folks that think about offensive cyber as, like little army men with guns, and they're just going to go after the bad guy, they're going to shoot him, and they're going to be gone. That's not how that works, right? Once you shoot like ones and zeros at these guys, that guy doesn't die. He doesn't stop being an asset, right? Like, it is just like a video game. They keep respawning. So I really am very careful in my thought of like offensive attacks, because there's really no way to stop the wave. And the thing is that if we as a nation come out of this looking like the bad guy, everybody in the world will now come after us. This is what happened to Russia. Russia went and did a kinetic attacks against Ukraine. And in those days, the 2 weeks leading to those attacks, there were cyber attacks on their infrastructure. They hit Ukraine in multiple facets. They were trying to weaken their defenses. The global community came together, much like you would expect from a group like Anonymous, for example. They came together and counterattacked Russia, and they did an incredible job. You see, you don't have a team in cyber. You can just decide one day that you're going to go after any Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, right? And so if we become the bad guys, I think that that's really harmful for us politically and in this space, because if we turn out to be the bad guys, then all the other guys out there would come after us. I think I would advise that maybe we don't do that.
I've received some clarification earlier. There's a question about NSM 22, and that refers to National Security Memorandum 22. It is a Biden-era policy to strengthen and modernize legacy systems and critical infrastructure with minimum requirements. And as a reminder, the original question is, what do you think about this, and how will it affect the resilience going forward?
I support modernization.
I'm glad you don't support us being going backwards.
So I think some of the main questions around what we do collectively have focused on reporting, and when I say collectively, I mean all of society. And for a long time, companies were hesitant to report if they'd had a cyber incident. They're less hesitant to do so now. But there is still this question of, should we have a system where where there are requirements in place, where you have to do it for in a certain period of time. The SEC has some requirements, I think, and there's talk about broadening those, or can it be voluntary? And I think this is still a hard topic, because in the moment after a cyber incident for a company, they have to think about it from two ways. One, you want to let the FBI, federal government, come in and take a look at what the specifically what happened. But you also might be worried that same entity is going to be looking at your company to see, hey, here's what you did wrong. And so it's a little bit like what we see in financial regulation, where there's the responsibility to both be in there to work closely and observe, but they also are going to enforce the law when there's errors, malfeasance. So I think that is the challenging place we are right now. We need to have a system where there's trust with the government, that the government can come in to help, find out what happened to an entity, so where we can make sure it doesn't happen elsewhere. But then you also do have to have accountability if organizations are not properly taking care of individuals' data.
So, if I may, I think that kind of reporting goes hand in hand with coordination and cooperation among entities.
Yeah.
And we saw it work to very good effect back when we were, both Amazon and Microsoft were being hit up with distributed denial of service attacks and spam attacks. And we started to share information together, which is not natural among competitors. I mean, we don't like each other, but we decided to share, and it had some good results. They tracked down this guy in Canada, and he was arrested and thrown in jail. And so, I mean, it really was that kind of a success. But companies are reluctant to talk to each other for a variety of reasons. One is competition. I think you can sort of think beyond that. It's better for us to come together on some of this. The other is antitrust. Certainly the government should not punish cooperation among companies who are absorbing the brunt of these attacks.
Yeah.
What I think may not have been addressed in that memorandum is that some of this already exists. So the NERC and the FERC, which the NERC is the North American Energy Reliability Council, and the FERC is an adjacent group of that, they create guidance for all energy producers and distributors. And it tells you what you have to do. Here's the minimum requirements that you have to harden your systems. Texas is exempted from that. They don't belong to the, whatever, you guys know what happened with Texas. But that doesn't exist today in water and gas. And I think that it would be a great opportunity to take the framework that exists today and apply it to those other major systems. There are others, right? There's a policy that comes out at each administration about what are the president's priorities. Typically, cyber is in it, highlighted for good reasons, and then which individual sectors they categorize as like critical infrastructure. Health is also one of them. What exists today are called ISACs. HSISAC is the health ISAC. There's an aerospace one. There's a space one. And all of these groups, and I just happen to know because I belong to many of them, are very focused about how do we protect our infrastructure. So in outer space, for example, there are guidance for them about how do they protect the computer systems. By the way, nobody's flying satellites. There's nobody in there, right? Like moving the satellites, all of it's done with computers, so they're very cognizant about computer security and cyber security. All of that said, that the framework does exist and it could be reused. About reporting, one of the interesting jobs that I've had is doing cyber threat intelligence. Cyber threat intelligence is when I worked for Equinix at the time, we would partner with other companies like Microsoft, who were in our data center, and Amazon and Oracle and everyone else. And what happens is the intelligence community, how you would think about like intelligence today, who's the bad guy and where are they? We do that today as a community in cyberspace. And so we'll send what are called indicators of compromise to each other, and we'll collect this information together to find out what are bad guys doing, and then we put them in a system, and that system looks for that particular indicator of compromise. Those connections, right, the technology that exists and those Intel analysts that are doing this work are really important because, like you mentioned, the articles, like you guys are probably not looking at articles about cyber, whatever happened today. The fact of the matter is that it happens so often that in our world, we're reading 7, 8, 9 articles a day about who got breached. There's so many of them that they don't even make headline news anymore. And what we end up doing, just kind of like opening the curtain of what happens in the real world, is they'll say, hey, whatever, pick a camera. This camera has a vulnerability and you should patch it. And so what we do is we go look at our infrastructure and we go, do we have any of these? And so what our teams are doing every day is looking at what did the bad guy do, what did they break, and do we have any of them? And then go fix it. And that is tons of people's jobs every single day in every one of these companies. Everyone that you use, Oracle, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all of those companies have their own version of a cyber threat intelligence group, and they spend a lot of time doing this kind of spy versus spy thing that is trying to protect you at the end of the day.
Let's do a quick speed round here. We've got a couple of questions that I'm hoping we can just get one answer for each. Given that you were just talking about satellites, Laura, what about vulnerabilities specific to satellite systems, SpaceX, and the fact that it's from the private sector? Is there anything specific to satellites that is different than the rest of cyberspace?
Kinetic. satellites fly in outer space, and outer space junk hits them, and then sometimes they go down. That is their number one threat, is literally space debris that hits them.
And EMP.
Yes, but we're not putting nukes in space right now. Knock on wood.
We're not.
Okay, let's not encourage that behavior. Good. Ellen, if the voting system is so decentralized, what did the Russians do in 2016?
It was a disinformation campaign. They had a bunch of folks sitting in in a place in Russia, and they were launching information into cyberspace. It would show up. They were impersonating U.S. citizens. They were creating fake personas, and they were spreading disinformation and just trying to sow chaos and make democracy look bad. There's a couple of different reasons why foreign governments want to muck around in our elections. One is sometimes they actually have a preference as to which candidate they want to see win, so they'll spread bad stories about the other candidate and nice stories about their favorite candidate, and sometimes they just want to make a mess. They want democracy to look messy and chaotic and unattractive because otherwise their people might want a democracy. So it was a disinformation campaign. It wasn't targeting the machinery, it was targeting us.
Okay, we've got which password protection is best and user-friendly? And I'll leave this open to whoever wants to answer it.
I don't think there's a best. I can tell you that there's a lot of options. There's free options and there's paid options. LastPass, 1Password. There's probably 8 different versions. I think people should use what they can afford. And so if you need a free and open source option, there's one out there. If you're willing to spend a few bucks, there's a few out there. What do I use? My preference, I use 1Password. It's really simple to use. I just push a button. It does my passwords for me. It looks at my face. So I don't have to remember my passwords, and that's how I do it.
Can you clarify that that's the name?
1Password, the number
Yeah,
one.
But it's not 1Password for all your
Yeah,
accounts.
good. Thank you. Thank you. You're right. My password is also not password. If your password is password, we know.
They also have a in the cloud
Yeah.
version.
Uh-huh.
Is that safe?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's AES encrypted. All of them are encrypted, but yes.
Then here we've got a slightly longer question. Since the Trump administration is dropping/giving up on spying on Russia, what are the risks for the USA?
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to, there's a lot to unpack there.
Okay, well then I will ask for a slightly more happy, sorry, did I interrupt anything? Okay. Let's try to end on a slightly happier note as we push for this again. Is there anything that's being done, could be done? Like, do we know that it is possible to have a positive outcome from this? Or is cyber just going to be our downfall and it will only go downhill? I'm really hoping the answer is no, it won't be our downfall.
It won't be our downfall, I hope. But no, seriously, every technology has positive and negative benefits. I mean, or positive benefits, negative reactions. So that's no different than a lot of the other things we did. Somehow we got through the 1950s when we were going to have atomic cars and all that kind of stuff, and it didn't quite work out that way. But that's for the better that it didn't work out that way. So I'd like to think that we can emphasize the positive virtues of this technology. I think, frankly, we're going through growing pains on this. Now, the funny thing at the end of the tunnel is quantum computing, whether that will so quickly change things that we don't have time to react to it. And that's a reasonable fear to have.
I think the other positive is when you would poll CEOs 10 years ago about their biggest fears, cybersecurity was up there at the top. It's come down in that time, and that's because they've taken most large companies, companies of a lot of sizes, have taken this seriously. They have CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, in place. They've invested money in it and realized just how detrimental a massive cyber attack could be to their well-being. I mean, really, the Sony breach, which was unique in being a nation-state attack on a company in, 2010, 2012, from that, around then, was the wake-up call for a lot of companies that they need to take this seriously, and a lot has been done since then.
I think to add to what you just mentioned is a year or two ago, CISOs had two things going for them, right? So you guys are chief financial officers, chief technology officers. Those people have like a seat at the board, and they have a voice at the table. And CISOs were kind of treated like just directors and, not really given budgets or whatever. But the fact of the matter is there was an incident, a major incident. I won't name the company because we're not going to embarrass them today. But they had essentially a ransomware attack. And in order to pay that ransomware attack, what they did is created a bug bounty program. A bug bounty is when you essentially let anybody in the public try to hack your systems, and if they get in, they win money. And then you give them that money and you patch whatever they broke. Cool story, right? Well, they used the bug bounty program they created to pay the bad guys who had legitimately ransomwared them. As a result, the CISO ended up in trouble. Like, they went to court, they would have ended up in jail. But instead of going to jail now, the CISO has to do speaking circuits about, don't do the dumb thing that I did. What that means is that now there's more teeth involved, meaning that there is judicial precedence on cyber attacks. And so now businesses can't just keep sweeping things under the rug. Additionally, the government requires you to do a Schedule K, which is, hey, I got breached, my bad, so sad, here, I need to tell you what happened. And you have to do that report in a reasonable amount of time, but if you don't do it, you get in trouble. What threat actors are doing today, sorry, I don't mean to laugh. What threat actors are doing today is they're attacking companies and then telling them, if you don't pay us the ransom in a reasonable amount of time, we're gonna tell on you to dad. And dad's going to be so mad, right? Dad being the government. And so these are some of the tactics. Now, what that means is, from business standpoint, we take it way more seriously. We put a lot more money in it. There's insurance, just special cyber insurance. So I think that we've made a ton of advancements in the last 20 years that address kind of all of those things that we're worried about. It means that we're just taking it more seriously. And I hope that that means a safer day for your data wherever it's sitting.
I just want to say a couple words about disinformation, which is designed to make us lose trust in our own institutions. And that loss of trust is really damaging to democracy. But just as we can all play a role in trying to prevent scams and frauds by being a little bit savvy and not clicking on things and trying to avoid phishing expeditions, we also have to be more savvy and more skeptical about the information that we're consuming online and that we're sharing online, and make sure that you're getting it from trusted sources. Something that some guy said on the internet, no matter how appealing it is to all of your biases, is not necessarily the truth. So, be a little bit cautious and be a little bit skeptical about what you read online, and particularly about what you share online, because you don't want to become part of the problem.
I love that. The confirmation bias is like the biggest problem. The people who retweet or whatever you're doing, messages based off of just headlines, but they don't read the article. I love the have a critical eye piece of that. Thank you.
And unfortunately, our kids are digital natives, and they are more skeptical. So it's folks of my generation that are taken in more often by this stuff. So we need to be especially careful.
You guys are answering questions faster than we can come up with them here. It's wonderful. Maybe we're going backwards here for a second, but what are your nightmares about? Let's go all the way, from a cyber perspective. I don't want to hear about the clowns or anything.
Let's not get too personal there, Tyler.
But what is it that really keeps you up at night? Because I think in some ways that's helpful to know what isn't the threat. What is the threat? What's the scary thing?
Well, complacency, right? Complacency. And it took her almost an hour, but Laura finally gave me some good news to think about. And so
Right.
thank you. I appreciate that. I'm feeling slightly optimistic again. But to Ellen's point, absolutely be skeptical, but please don't be cynical. It doesn't need to go that direction. Skeptical means you're questioning. Cynicism means you already are assuming an outcome, a result, an opinion. And so all this can be pretty depressing, what we're talking about today. But so be skeptical in your ordinary lives, just like all of us are. But I wouldn't be cynical about it either.
I think biggest fear, I mean, we've talked a little bit about how, these are tools that are more accessible and can do a lot of destruction. And so I think the thing you're always concerned about is, we did go through a Cold War where you had détente, and at the end of the day, it was a few number of people who could destroy the entire world. But as these proliferate and technology gets more advanced, the fear, and I think that you have a lot of national security folks and policymakers who are working on this and thinking about how to solve it, is it's in the wrong hands, or you have a mistake, or you have rogue entities within a country that would make use of cyber tools that would be incredibly destructive if they hit the right infrastructure.
Okay. I am a grandmother. I know, don't ask. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. My biggest fear is current use of artificial intelligence to create child sexual abuse material. And what's happening is there are applications that are available on the internet and on GitHub that essentially can take somebody's face and superimpose it or create it into content that would be what used to be called child pornography is now child sexual abuse material. The challenge with that type of material is a few things. One, first, it exists out there in the world forever. There's no getting it out, there's no getting it back, there's no getting it removed with current legislations. 2, there's reputational harm that would hurt her life forever. It would hurt her prospects of getting a job in the future. It would hurt her ability to get scholarships and go to maybe a prestigious university, maybe to come here. And that is happening today to people in this country, to little kids in this country, primarily females, right? This is, unfortunately, a crime that primarily affects girls. And there is no protection. There's no protection in any state for this. There are 20 states that have artificial intelligence laws that keep, deep fakes, like presidential deep fakes where they're saying something inflammatory. Those exist in 20 countries, but there's nothing protecting children today from kind of an emerging threat. And the worst part of it is that kids are using it against each other. So there are middle schoolers who are taking pictures of their peers and generating this kind of content and then sharing it with each other. And if you've ever had this experience in your life when gossip makes its round through the school, one, there's no way of getting it back into the box. Nobody admits that it was a lie, and there's no way of protecting that child because their reputational harm is forever, in whatever school this is in. And that is happening today, and that is the thing that I want the most to protect my children against, because there's no mechanism to protect them today.
Well, I don't have a nightmare that can compete with that one, so I'm going to try and pull us back a little bit to a slightly more positive note about nightmares. I fear that we lose faith in ourselves, that we lose faith in our ability to tell truth from falsity, that we lose faith in our ability to maintain our democracy and to elect good leaders who will come up with good solutions for us. And I think it is on all of us as citizens not to tune out And I suspect if you are here within the sound of my voice that you are not one of those tuned out people, but maybe you know some people who are. I understand the temptation to say it's all so depressing and I just don't want to think about it, and I'd rather not be involved, but I think people making decisions on the basis of low information or bad information or just deciding they don't want to be part of the process and tuning out entirely is a risk that every single one of us as citizens can fight against. So that's my message to everyone, to stay positive and stay engaged and look for the best possible information that you can find and try to verify it and make sure it comes from reliable sources and help to share reliable information amongst your networks.
And on that fantastically positive and proactive note, I believe we've run out of time. Thank you everyone for attending today.